Okay, so you really want to know, huh? Fine. I'm gonna start by telling you this. And this is important, so listen up. Your entire life, this one and many others, you've been a god who uses its absolute power to make yourself powerless. Entire cultures, especially this one, have all been afraid of their weaknesses, supposedly, when in reality, they've all been afraid of their power. This goes beyond the matrix of reality. This is something much deeper than that. This is eternal. This is fully realizing your consciousness. This is infinite. This is evolution. This is our divine right.
All right, everybody, welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited today. This is going to be a super duper fun podcast. I have the Saffron Sage. It sounds expensive because it is. Cassandra Osterberg, and she's on the show today. I'm really excited to talk with her. We already have some fun topics lined up. But before we get started and I introduce her, I just want to give a quick shout out to my friends at Content Safe who are taking every precaution to make sure this podcast never gets taken down, no matter what stupid thing I say on it. I don't trust anybody more than Content Safe with my material other than, well, the NSA. The NSA has a pretty proven track record. But as far as things go, Content Safe is amazing. They rock. They've got a lot of people's backs. And if you're interested in backing up your stuff and you don't have to sit at a computer download or uploading stuff all day, they are the answer for you. So big shout out to them. I really appreciate them being willing to work with me. And from there, let's get into it. Now, no pressure, obviously, like this will be on the blockchain and everything. So you're going to expose me and talk about my chart live on the internet. But Cassandra, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we've been talking for a while, and I really love your approach. I really like how, how you're kind of engaging with folks, and really just kind of your stance and your, how you are coming into spirituality. Everybody kind of has their own, I guess, I don't even know how to say it, their own style, I guess, but like, it's really more about mentality as far as I think, and I think that we are definitely on the same page about that.
Totally. I love how you call yourself a blue collar mystic, and I just feel like the spiritual community needs more grounded people who can also like function in the world. So it's nice and like refreshing to see that.
Yeah, I like that too. I really like that you're grounded perspective and from a place of practicality, but you're also in the stars, so to speak.
Totally.
Like there's a lot to learn from that. And we also have to apply it in real life. We live in this third dimension reality. And I think escapism is not a very healthy way to live life, in any, religion or belief system, like I was at some people's houses the other day, and no disrespect. I hope for their case, they're right. But the guy was like, I believe in the pre-tribulation rapture. And if there is no pre-tribulation rapture, I believe in a mid-tribulation rapture. If there is no mid-tribulation rapture, which, I mean, hey, that sounds nice. I've heard people talk about like splitting timelines in the New Age community, which is basically the same idea, right?
Right.
But I just, I can't count on something like that. I can count on waking up in the next day and, everything that's happened that we've been through over the past specifically year. I was like, can I jump? If anybody could have jumped a timeline, it's this guy. You know what I'm saying? I was doing pretty good before this whole thing went down. And I think the most important thing, no matter what your belief system is that you just have a firm connection to God, spirit, the universe, whatever you want to call that. And what from there, what difference does it make? What happens?
Totally. Yeah. So much of that I relate to. And I feel like we all want, like, our mind wants to know, that we're in that percentage of people who make it to the next level and who ascend, but really the mind is never satisfied. So that path never ends. But knowing you're on the right path today and being able to master today and using your gifts today, like, that's something we all can do.
Yeah, I love that. And that's like a really straightforward, easy thing to do. Like you said, it's never going to end. We're always going to be on this path. But being on that path, that's why it's the journey, not the destination. And
Totally.
I really think that the rewards, emotional payouts, that we get from being, willing to take that risk and do the thing that we know that we need to do. At least we feel good in our body. And I feel like that's a birthright. But tell us a little bit about how you got your start in spirituality and specifically astrology.
Okay, so I started on my spiritual path back in like 2012 because I was sick all over. And so I started doing Reiki out of desperation because I had tried all these other, like I tried every kind of diet. I just had kind of obsessed over making physical changes. And finally, it's like I was willing. And then through a series of events, I just continued to kind of grow more spiritually, but really slow. Like I was always jealous of those people who like woke up and started channeling, and I thought I was doing something wrong, but I just kind of learned piece by piece, the next step. And I really felt lost, even though I was doing all the things, meditating and doing Reiki, and I learned tarot, and I just kept, like, I did a 2-year degree. I kept trying to find the answers. And finally, not that long ago, I discovered astrology, and I found that it's the most practical guide to awakening, to ascension. And it just really laid things out in a way that I could finally follow, because I couldn't really apply a lot of the other spiritual information I had, even though I knew it to my core.
That's really cool. I love it when we find that thing that really resonates with us. For me, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people probably know this, spoiler alert, it was reality transurfing, but that was like the map that I was like, yeah, this is definitely what I can use to guide myself. And I really focused in and drilled down on that specific map. And since then, of course, incorporated a lot of tools about those principles and ideas. But as far as the map goes, that was the one for me. And it sounds like astrology is the one for you.
Yes, I also love reality transurfing, and I learned my human design kind of around the same time. And I think those things put together really helped me kind of understand myself and how to like not put too much importance on what I wanted, because that was a huge problem before.
Yeah, definitely a big problem I've had too. That's really cool. And yeah, as I've taken that foundation, I found that, I've been able to implement certain other things to it, and I think that one of my strengths personally is knowing what my weaknesses are. And astrology is definitely one of my weaknesses. I don't know much about it, but I think there's so much power in it. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about astrology and just that kind of as a, we'll build a little bit of a foundation, and then you're going to read me on you're gonna look into my chart. So I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So astrology can tell you so much about yourself, your strengths and weaknesses, where we naturally shine. Our sun sign is going to be where we naturally shine, but and a lot of people know their sun sign because we know the day we were born, right? But what a lot of people don't always dive into is the more personal planets. Even though the sun is a personal planet, it doesn't move as fast as the moon, for example. So like a lot of people, when they find out their moon sign, then they're like, whoa, because that's your emotions. That's your emotional nature. People don't always see that part of yourself. And it can just tell you when you have a feeling, are you more likely to run away from that feeling? Are you going to take action? Are you going to go internal and just, destruct? Or how are you going to deal with those things? And so we can even go beyond how you feel to self-mastery. And that's the part I'm super excited about, is there are points in the chart, everyone's are different, that help us, that we don't relate to, that are for us to master. So like the Midheaven is an example where it's the top of the chart. Most people don't know about it, but it's, if you want to be successful in your career, you can move toward the energy of your Midheaven. And it's in astrology, it gets oversimplified, where just because you have your midheaven in Aries does not mean you have to be a firefighter. It just means that for you, moving toward the energy of taking the lead and being passionate and active you're going to be more successful. And we oftentimes will not want to do these things, right? It'll be our comfort zone will be the opposite. And so the midheaven and the north node are two of those points that if someone really wants to know their purpose, it won't tell you this is what your purpose is, but it will tell you this is the direction to head. These are the energetic patterns, the emotional patterns to focus on to really cultivate yourself. So that's an overview.
That's really cool. Okay, so midheaven is something that I never have heard. I've heard north node quite a few times, and I've had some readings. I had a friend a couple of years ago kind of tell me some news I didn't want to hear, but she also knew some things that were, I'm like, how could you have known that? Like certain things I'm like, that's too real. But she told me to download the iLuna app, which is basically charting the moon, and to journal with each one. And I did start to notice very quickly patterns emerging with the the cycles of the moon. And I would even get to the point where I'm like, well, I would like not book shows on certain days, and like I don't feel funny on these days.
Yes.
Serious and logical on these days. But I've had to kind of break that as a habit and just force myself into that anyway, because even though I don't feel funny, it doesn't mean that I couldn't still play a good show. There's that weird thing there performer wise where you're observing yourself in the state that you're in versus how you're being perceived. So I've tried to not let that limit me, but at the same time, it might be smart to use as a tool.
100%. I love that because the moon moves fast, right? It goes through a full cycle in a month. So we can all work with that and learn pretty quickly just by paying attention to the moon. And I relate. I can't really do a whole lot when the moon's in Cancer. I just turn into a puddle.
But I mean, you can kind of plan that out. You're like, well, I got my Ben and Jerry's. I got
Yeah.
moon's in Cancer, so it's going to be a little bit of a me party that weekend.
Yes.
That's cool. I like that. It's practical. So from there, how does the sun, the moon, the rising, what are all those types of things?
Yeah, so the sun is like our identity. It's like our core essence. It's like the sun shines, right? So it's the part of us that just emanates from within us. We don't have to try to embody our sun. We just will. And so then we have the moon, which is our emotional nature and what we need to be okay. Our sun, we still need our sun to be okay, but like we don't really have to try usually to embody our sun because it's there. So our moon, like if you have your moon in a water sign, you'll have more of an emotional nature because water rules emotions. Someone with their moon in a air sign, they're going to communicate more. They're going to need communication more because that's what they need to be okay. For fire signs, it's action, it's passion, and they are not always going to be as, I don't want to say emotionally available, but they won't be natural counselors and stuff, right? If their moon is in a fire sign, because they'll want to be taking their own actions and just doing things they're passionate about. Of course, that depends on all the other placements. And then Earth is practical and very work focused on service, and they'll, a moon sign in Earth is going to nurture you by making you food or, helping you figure your life out. So, it's how we nurture, how oftentimes the moon will indicate our relationship with our mother. The sun will indicate our relationship with our father. And then our rising sign is how the world sees us. It's the image we project to the world. It's still a part of our identity. And people don't always relate to their rising sign because it's kind of like how other people see you. And it kind of depends. Like if someone had their sun, moon, and rising in the same sign, they're just going to embody that energy and they will be less complex. If someone has their sun, moon, and rising in like 3 different elements, they're going to have a little bit more, probably a little more internal conflict. And they might not be able to describe themselves as well because they'll feel like, well, sometimes I'm like this and sometimes I'm like this. So that's kind of a basic overview of sun, moon, and rising.
That's really interesting. It makes a lot of sense. Quite a bit of sense, really, because I mean, it's already kind of hard to have self-awareness, but you know, depending on. And so what are these kind of with these elements? Is it like electromagnetism that kind of influences us with these changes, or these like different characteristics in our personality? How do the planets being where they are really affect us as far as like from a scientific or practical standpoint?
Okay, so from a practical standpoint, astrology is just observing where the planets are and what's happening. And by doing that over thousands of years, patterns emerge. And so really that's all astrology is noticing the patterns based on placements. And it actually correlates to the law of correspondence, right? As above, so below. And so when we see the chart, when we're looking at a natal chart, we're looking at the person, their natural, how they came into the world. And so it's important to distinguish that if you've done work on yourself, you may not relate to some of the challenges, you know, like just because someone has Saturn, like you have Saturn in Libra. So sometimes people with that placement, they'll feel isolated in relationships early in life, but I'm not going to assume that you isolate all the time, right? I'm going to assume you maybe have worked on that. Maybe you've changed since you were born, right? So there's that side of it too, where it becomes evolutionary astrology, where we can use our challenges. Yes, that will always have been something you had to work through. And depending on where you're at on that scale, you know, that might be active for you, or it might be long overcome. But I see it as each planet represents a part of ourselves. So Saturn is the disciplinarian. Mercury is our communication. Jupiter is our like happy-go-lucky expansion. Pluto is transformation. It's our underworld, the part of us we don't always admit that exists. We don't want people to see that because it's powerful and it's dark and it's not pretty. You know, it's not what everyone wants to talk about at the dinner table. Mars is how we take action. It's the warrior. So each planet, each sign has an archetype that is within us all. And so people will say like, why don't I have planets in the 10th house? Maybe I don't have a career. What does it mean? But that doesn't mean you don't have a career. It just means your career, it actually usually is, sometimes it's good not to have planets in a sign, but you still have a sign on the cusp of that house. So someone with no planets in the 10th house in Leo, they could still be an actor. They just maybe have to learn how to use their other archetypes to their advantage in that sector of life.
And so the houses are like Aries, Cancer, and
okay, so those are the signs. So okay, the houses are like pizza slices of the sky of the day you were born, and the time you were born. So like someone took a picture of the earth and all the constellations around it, and each house is like a piece of pizza that represents an area of life. So like if all the planets were in the first house when you were born, you'll be very, like your identity, who you are, that house is going to be really active for you in life. Now that could mean it goes really well, or it could mean it's a train wreck, just depending on what planets are there and how they're interacting.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I've heard, you know, I hear people and they sound so smart, you know, like I'll be on Clubhouse and they're like, well, you've got Saturn in the 10th house. And, you know, and I feel like they're just blowing smoke. I'm like, what is this person talking about? But when you break it down that way, that each sign is an archetype, and then where the placement is via the house, that's how it like relates. That makes a lot more sense, and it's a little bit easier to understand.
Yeah, you do have Saturn in the 10th house, and that is actually a really good placement because Saturn rules the 10th house of career. So that's actually good. But also what you should know about that is Saturn will restrict whatever it touches. So whatever house we have Saturn in, we're going to be a late bloomer. So for you, if you had trouble in your career, or you felt stifled, or like you couldn't, I imagine you probably felt, because you have Pluto conjunct Mars there as well. So it's like you have so much power and so much potential to make a huge impact, and probably a lot of desire to not just make an impact, but make an impact that really makes a difference in other people's lives, because you have it in Libra, the sign of balancing the scales. So what that all means is you probably really struggled with not understanding why you have all this potential to grow in your career early in life, but that like maybe the moves you made, the actions you took earlier in life probably didn't make as much of an impact. But as you get older, you can make more and more of an impact. So that's kind of good news for you, that like you shouldn't base your success on the past in that area. So, but everyone has that somewhere. So like I have it in the third house of communication. So early in life, I struggled with communicating, and people didn't listen to me. And I still sometimes have to like rewire my brain to remind myself that people want to listen to me now, because that area of life was so messed up as a child.
Interesting. Well, I was just riffing when I said Saturn in the 10th house. I had no idea that came in there. I must have just came through, you know. But that makes a lot of sense. I've always felt like a late bloomer, frankly, and I tried so many things, and I think that's why I have the big pain point of like helping people find purpose, because I tried so many things and nothing hit. And so I definitely don't judge my success now on what happened in the past, but you know, I also learned a lot of skills too, so that was cool. You know, like that's one thing that, you know, we talk a lot about, is like anything like jack of all trades, master of none is only the first half of that. Like the off time's better than master of one. We should be doing many things, and it's a good healthy thing to do. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense as far as I go. Like I tried to be a musician. I was going to be a rock star, of course, right? Like, and then raft guide, you know, I was an entrepreneur as a tree farmer, and then Airbnb business. And those businesses were relatively successful, but they weren't like skyrocketing, you know, into the success that I sort of wanted at those times. But, you know, I do feel like I am like more and more going toward what I'm sort of meant to do, you know? So, so that's really good and also encouraging. So thank you for that. But yeah, I had Saturn the 10th, just,
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm super, super ignorant about astrology. As you can tell, I didn't even know the difference between a house and a sign. That's pretty basic stuff.
Most people don't. And it's okay. Astrology is a very complex science that it takes a long time to learn. So it's okay to like just have someone else tell you what it means.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And you're very knowledgeable. And I love the way that you explain it. Cause like I've talked to a lot of people about this stuff, and it just seems like, I don't know, it's just hard to understand. So, you know, I don't want to say anybody's pretentious. I don't think that's intentional. I think they're just passionate,
Right.
and it comes across
Right.
that way, because they're like, oh my God, blah, 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 blah. Because I imagine that once you do get a handle on this, it is a tremendous amount of fun.
It is a lot of fun, and it never ends. Like I love it because I'll never stop learning astrology. Like I will never be done. So it's fun as an astrologer as well.
Yeah, that's cool. It reminds me too, because as you're saying that, you know, some of us, we might go through some of these parts in our chart and really develop there. It kind of makes me think of the Enneagram, where someone who's like a healthy, let's say 7, you know, has already gone toward these traits of a 5, for instance, to incorporate. They may not be aware that they did that process, but they were aware that they needed to do something. They needed to work on themselves a little bit. So they went that way naturally. And maybe some of that is also what you're talking about within the chart, where like we have these challenges. There are these things that maybe we realize even without the map of astrology, and we're like, well, I need to work on this. And so I think that's really cool that you can, you know, use that as a way to understand where somebody is and where they could be and what they may have already gone through, and not just assuming that they're there, right? But that's cool.
Right.
Yeah, that's really cool. So yeah, so it's really, really interesting. Tell me more about me.
Okay.
I don't want the
That's
listeners
awesome.
to feel like, they're not getting something out of this. So let me know too how we can expand it and how other people can apply it to them as well, if you don't mind, if you can.
Totally. Yeah. So we'll start with your Jupiter because it's perfect and it ties in with what we're talking about. We'll talk about your Jupiter and your stellium because a lot of people have stelliums and everyone has Jupiter somewhere. Wherever you have Jupiter is an area of life you have a natural gift, and by focusing in on it, your life will get better. You're more likely to be successful. It doesn't mean you don't already have challenges or things will be easy. It's just a point in your chart that everyone has a gift somewhere. And there are many of these, but Jupiter is one you can look up on your own if you're listening to this. So for you, Owen, you have Jupiter in Scorpio, which is a sign of getting to the bottom of things, researching, digging, really not being satisfied with what someone tells you. And I imagine you probably felt this way your whole life, where an adult would tell you something and you would be like, yeah, fucking right. Just not believe anything they say and have to go find out for yourself what the truth was.
Mm-hmm.
And for you, it's in your 10th house of career, which means that first of all, you have so much potential to be successful with having Jupiter in the 10th house, because it really is just a very, very strong success placement for career. So know that. And also, the crazy thing about this is when I looked this up, that one of the textbook definitions of Jupiter and Scorpio is researching metaphysical laws. So I was like, weird. You might have noticed in your life that as you got more into metaphysics or talking about metaphysics, that perhaps during that time things started to grow more, right? Because that's your natural Jupiter and the other ways this could show up too for other people who might have Jupiter there and maybe don't relate to that is getting to the bottom of things. So maybe a therapist would help people, uncover their limiting beliefs, or also do theta healing and really go in and find the root cause of something. Other ways Scorpio energy can show up is darker taboo aspects of life, like sexuality or death. Okay, so someone could be a death doula. They could work with, even do mediumship if they also had eighth house planets or other things like that. So everyone has a Jupiter somewhere, and the more you capitalize on your Jupiter, the more likely you are to just get rewards for that thing.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because when I first started out, I was trying to be somewhat like a political activist. I started making YouTube videos doing that. And to me, the way I view it is it just wasn't congruent with what my purpose is, which is really to bring joy, and come from that place. And I can talk about heavier topics if I do it from that place. But, coming from this rah, this is terrible sort of angle, it just never landed. So when I started to really research and incorporate more metaphysical things, it definitely changed everything. I really did start to connect because I felt like I was congruent to doing that, as well as bringing the information in a way that is a little bit more, has more levity, I would say. Seemed to be a really congruent and a powerful place to kind of start with that. So that's interesting.
That totally makes sense. We can also talk about your north and south node, just because those are so important for life purpose, and so many people get stuck on these. So for you, your north node is in Cancer, which you also have your sun and Mercury there. And that's good because that means when people have planets on their north node, usually it's a little easier for them to access that energy because it's a little more familiar. If someone has planets on their south node, they'll probably get stuck and sucked back into it a little bit more. But the North Node in Cancer is your lessons for this life, and your South Node in Capricorn means you've had past lives that were really focused on sacrifice and work, where you like give up your own personal relationships or own personal desires for the greater mission with a focus on working hard. And so what can happen is you can bring in these patterns of working really hard when you don't need to, or sometimes people with this placement can become workaholics where they will just avoid relationships, or just want to always revert back to, I'm going to work hard. That's how I'm going to solve this problem. And so what we do with the North and South Node is we take the lessons, the blessings, but we use it in a North Node way. So if you were to just focus on working hard, that would not work for you, because you've already mastered the lesson of working hard and having virtue and having a greater mission. So what you do is you take those qualities you have and you use them to do Cancer type things, which is nurturing people's emotions, making people feel good, validating where they are, speaking about your own emotions, being vulnerable, which wherever your North Node is, you're not going to want to usually do those things always naturally. It's usually going to feel like, ooh, I'd rather not do that, because the North Node in Cancer person will revert back to feeling like they don't have control, or they don't have, like, there's a fear that if I share my feelings openly, this person will have power over me. And so the North Node in Cancer person has to work through that. And so every person has a North Node. Not everyone's is in Cancer, but each placement is going to tell us our natural comfort zone. And we can put so much energy into it and it will never work for us. And this is why I can't stand like cookie cutter coaching programs, because what if that coaching program is actually what is your South Node? You're not going to be able to get value out of it if it's about working hard and that's it, right? So it's so fascinating to me how much of our journeys are just our own personal lessons, right? So for you, it's nurturing, it's validating and understanding other people's emotions, and also really, I feel like with Cancer, it's kind of beingness, right? Presence, and just like being with a person, you'd have way more power than you would trying to control them. But you still can tell people what to do. You still have a very keen business sense. That's one of the gifts of the South Node as well, is you can kind of tell people these are the steps you need to take, but you would just need to do it in a kind of nurturing way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. I'm still learning communication stuff there, but that definitely makes sense. And I'm learning more about business stuff too. I've definitely learned a lot about it over the past several months, and I love helping people with that. You know, it's super duper fun because I it's pretty cool when you actually get to see results. Like, how many times have you bought that course? How many times have you went down, you know, and done some research about something and get really excited about it, and then you get to the end of it and it's like, wow, this just did not. It just, there was no return. You know, like, so it's pretty addictive when there is, though. It's pretty amazing. But
yeah.
Interesting. And so what is Midheaven?
The Midheaven is the top of the chart. So our IC is on the bottom. The Midheaven is on the top. It's like the point of culmination, right? It's the point of glory we all work toward. People call it the house of fame, the 10th house, the house of fame, or the house of career, but it's really the Midheaven is the point at the top that starts that house. And I wouldn't call it either one of those things, because everyone has a midheaven, but not everyone is famous and not everyone has a career, right? So it's what you're most likely to be known for. And it's not specific. So an example is you have a Libra midheaven. An example of someone else with a Libra midheaven is Tiffany Haddish, the comedian.
Oh, God. She's hilarious. I've worked with her.
I know. You have?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love her.
I produced a movie that just came out on Netflix a couple of weeks ago called Bad Trip that she's in. And I'm actually, I wasn't supposed to be in the movie as like an extra or anything, because I was doing a lot of the field production, so I have like a credit as a field producer. But like in the scene in the bus scene with Eric Andre, when he's coming clean to Rel, like I'm just like a weirdo just staring back, like, is everything going okay? Because I had brought all these people to this bus thing to have them like think that they were going to go on this bus tour, right? And so they had no idea that they were on the bus. So it was a bus full of prank marks that didn't know they were there being shot. So we did that a lot during the movie, and that was my role, really, was bringing people into scenes unknowingly. And so you just see me like staring back the whole time. But Tiffany Haddish plays the sister in that movie, and it's really before she really got kind of big, because it was shot like, I want to say like 3 and 4 years ago.
Okay.
But it was number 1 on Netflix for a minute. It's raunchy, but it's funny. So Bad Trip is what it's called. So it's Tiffany Haddish is in that. So check it out.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it turned out really good. I was kind of nervous that it would never come out, but I'm super glad that it finally did. But yeah, so Tiffany Haddish, she has her Midheaven in Libra also. She has no filter, by the way, 0 filter. She does not care.
So the interesting thing about the Libra midheaven is there's 2 kind of main energies of Libra. One is beauty, aesthetics. So you can see artists or, people who do feng shui or interior decorating, people who want to beautify the world. And then the other side is more like a social justice warrior, like someone who wants to balance the scales. Okay. So we can see judges, we can see people who mediate, people who have diplomacy. But I use Tiffany Haddish as an example because she doesn't really kind of fit with any of that stuff. And this is why your midheaven cannot tell you your job, because you are not supposed to go say, oh, I have a Libra midheaven, maybe I'll be an artist if you don't care about art. It's about understanding how to embody that energy in your career. So for someone with a Libra midheaven, they'll get further if they focus on how to bring balance in some way. So how to bring harmony. And I think comedy is a way, right? Because you're really uplifting people, and not every comedian is trying to uplift people like that, right? Some of them are trying to get attention, or they're, they have different midheavens, not good or bad. But when you have a Libra midheaven, it's really about uplifting the other person. Some other people with Libra midheavens could also really focus on even something like helping people heal from addiction, because the scales are not even here and they want to balance that out for that person. So that's an example of totally different ways the same midheaven can show up.
Yeah, just saying the thing that you're not supposed to, too, is one way to balance the scale. That acknowledging the elephant in the room. Comedians do that a lot. But
yes,
just saying the one thing you're not supposed to say.
Yeah,
does balance the room, and people will laugh, and then if they acknowledge it, sometimes, not always, but usually, sometimes. No, interesting. Yeah, that's so funny that you brought her up too, because she is incredibly funny.
Yes, she is.
Everybody in that movie actually really is very funny. It turned out pretty good, but it's interesting to think that has something to do with like that midheaven has something to do, the top of the chart, with really like what you're maybe so you're saying it's not necessarily, you can't tell your career from that, but it somehow relates to like maybe your function in society or role.
Yes. And also another thing for you particularly, you also have 4 planets in your 10th house. And when a planet is in a house, it takes over. So for you, this energy isn't really probably as strong as the Jupiter that we talked about and your Pluto-Mars conjunction, which is like being on top and having power. And so it's really interesting because you have a conjunction about having power in the sign of like balancing the scales. So there's a balance for you between gaining your own power by helping other people. But the midheaven is, it's a point to move toward. So I think, for a lot of people who maybe are a little bit newer, they could look at the sign on their midheaven and the sign on their north node and just try to act like that sign. So for you, act like a Libra. That means think about the other person when you're talking. Consider their point of view. Be diplomatic. and then act like a Cancer, be nurturing. So that's a way to really simplify those two placements, is just try to act like that sign a little bit more.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's super helpful too. And those are things that I need to do, day to day as well. So like I'm pretty natural at nurturing, but I still obviously have to, remember to do it. It's funny, like sometimes I'll just be like waiting and for 3 minutes on the phone and on a phone call, and I'll be like, well, let's go, and then my energy of that, which is, I don't even know why I would even be bothered. But then all of a sudden the person comes on the phone and I'm like, oh my God, like, and then we have like a great time, we nurture, the call goes really well and we really enjoy each other. But it's just kind of funny to try to remember to approach it that way, and already be in that place, as opposed to like, just like, I don't know how to explain it. It's just like, maybe it's just nerves, I guess. It might just be nerves whenever I'm about to speak to somebody. And I've been really connecting with a lot of people lately, which has been amazing. Really, it's been really amazing to just chat with people. Like, put on an Instagram story and just like ask a question, and if somebody like responds to it, I'll be like, you want to talk on Zoom? You want to hang out on Zoom? Because like, I know people are a little bit more limited. Most people are at home now, and it's been a really interesting time to connect to people and foster relationships, because that is really important to me, and building community specifically. So I've been able to meet a lot of people such as yourself, as a direct consequence of all of this, because we're all on Zoom now.
Yeah.
we're all connecting digitally, which is cool. I want to still connect physically too, but connecting digitally is cool. So I know you have obligations after this show, so I don't want to keep you too long. So I would love for you to talk about how people can work with you. I feel like your analysis on me is spot on. So I'll just go ahead and say that to everyone. And if you want to just kind of talk about what your process is like, how you work with folks and where they can find you.
Sure. Yeah, I do private readings, and I focus on, everything we talked about: career, life purpose, your path in life. I don't do as much on like relationship compatibility type stuff, but I am on Facebook. So people can find me on Facebook, on YouTube, or on Instagram at the Saffron Sage. I also do weekly videos in my Facebook group called Astrology and Alchemy. And that's where I go live every week on the energy of the week. And we also talk a little bit about business and just career astrology. So yeah, the main way to work with me is to book a private reading. And my website is thesaffronsage.com.
Awesome. That's great. And I'll be sure to put all the links, of course, in the show notes. And yeah, I'm really blown away. And because I had no idea about astrology, and people talk to me about it all the time as if I'm supposed to know, just because I'm in the spiritual community, I think. And they're like saying all this stuff, and I'm like, yep. So I definitely need to learn. But now at least I feel like I have a foundation that makes sense, that I can make sense out of it. Like the pizza slices, perfect. Talk to me about pizza. I'm going to get the message. I'm going to totally understand exactly what's being said. Understanding too, Midheaven, the North Node, the South Node, or at least having a better idea of what those things are. And yeah, it's really, really cool how all these things, they tie in, and everyone kind of has their own specialty and perspective. And I think that's really, really cool. I would love to see how we could work together too, with folks, and maybe, do some live calls and things like that with people in the community and the group, and just
that would be so fun.
Yeah. I love that. That's really what I want to kind of get toward once I get back from, it's not vacation, I'm going to work, but like I'm going to Florida. So I'm stoked about that. It's wide open. Florida's going to be the best thing that it ever could have thought about being, which is normal. So I'm looking forward to that. And I get to like hang out and see some music and stuff. So that'll be cool. But when I get back, I really plan on just trying to, focus on community and connection as much as possible. So we'll definitely get something together where we do like a call one night and invite a bunch of people to come and chat, and maybe you can host an astrology sort of call, and we can all chat about it and learn more.
That'd be so fun.
Yeah, I would love that too. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Cassandra. I know you have a previous engagement, so I'll call it good here. It was an amazing podcast. Let's do it again. Let's do some live calls. Yeah, maybe we can reconnect on some other platforms as well.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.